Welcome to Andy Staples On3. We have a national championship game, and it took two classic semifinal matchups to get there. Jesse Simonton, welcome aboard. We just watched Washington survive Texas, and I thought it was going to be just a disaster, and like another Mario Cristobal, Miami, Georgia Tech situation. Like, why didn't you take a knee? You lost this. Well, we still can talk about that. They lost the starting running back by not taking a knee, but they did survive. They are going to play for the national title against Michigan.
Hold on to your butts.
Hold on to your butts. As John in the chat puts it, all Big Ten final.
What a great day of classic football, Andy. It was just, we got two awesome games, and they weren't the prettiest games. Tonight's game was a little more, thrilling in terms of some of the passing and the fireworks that we got. But, these games have such ebb and flows. The swings are so big. They're so long. People forget that just a lot of times it's just being able to hold on, to weather the storm, to get to the next play, to fight the next down. And ultimately, Michigan and Washington did that better than Alabama and Texas.
Well, and Texas just seemed done, absolutely done. And then they came back to life because Washington didn't want to run clock. Like, I don't understand why Washington didn't want to run clock. It was like watching the Peach Bowl last year where Ohio State wouldn't run clock.
Yeah, I mean, the decision by whether it was DeBoer or Grubb, both of them, not to run and force Texas to burn the timeout on that third down in the red zone when they were going to kick a field goal to go up, 10 points there. And then not just kneeling it out. Unfortunately, Dylan Johnson then gets hurt, so Texas doesn't have to see 30 more seconds get burned off the clock. That's a complete reprieve for them. But they survived, and it was a great pair of semifinals. It kind of delivered on, I think, the expectation going into today, Andy, that a lot of folks thought that this was going to be the most competitive two matchups we'd seen, and it delivered.
And I still agree with what I said earlier, where it felt like all four teams that were in this bracket could win the national title. Like, there was a way to play these games where you have an Alabama-Texas national title game. But Michigan came back, Washington held on. And this is what everybody wanted. They wanted fresh blood in the national title game, and they're absolutely getting it right now. My old friend Ari Wasserman is having a heart attack because this is a stars don't matter national title. Remember, there's some stars. Well, there's not.
There are some stars. You know what this is going to do, though, Andy? It's going to specifically recalibrate. I think, especially from Michigan's perspective, it's going to recalibrate how we look at some of the roster evaluations vis-a-vis versus the pure blue chip ratio, but with the transfer portal and kind of how you actually reassess what those guys are when you get them to what they are now in the present, because Michigan both has a roster full of developmental NFL players, plus they've supplemented the team with guys like Josiah Stewart, who on the final play of the game at the Rose Bowl you were at, blows up a 5-star offensive tackle, and Jalen Miller had an RPO where if it's a
let's look at this beautiful video of the final play.
Good snap and he doesn't get blown up, he could probably throw it out to Williams here and it might be a touchdown. Instead, the play gets blown up, he gets tripped, and Michigan's going to the national championship for the first time in 26 years.
Well, Leon in the chat, playoff committee proven wrong. He's a Florida State fan. Actually, Leon, the 1 and the 2 seed won. So I believe they were actually proven correct. So I don't think that proves anything. Now, maybe they were wrong about putting Florida State ahead of Georgia.
Yeah, I was going to say, if the one team that's really kicking themselves right now watching this, I think tonight, are certainly
is Georgia. Yeah,
because the path was there for them to pull off the improbable. You and I were together 6 months ago talking about how hard it would be to actually three-peat, that no one's done it since the 30s. the path was there, but they didn't get it done, and that's why we have new blood, and that's why we have Michigan, Washington in what should be an unbelievable game in Houston in a week.
I can't wait to see it. Though I am still trying to process, because this just happened, that Dylan Johnson won't be playing in this game. Well, maybe he will. I'm hoping he can. It looked bad though, and if that's the reason he can't play, again, I say this about Kalen DeBoer all the time. Like, I never disagree with anything he does. I disagreed with that. Like, that's the first thing I saw where I was like, that's not the right move right now.
Well, it was funny because I think all four in both these games, all four staffs and fans of these teams could quibble with some of the decision making that they made. It's you can always second guess, hindsight 2020. I understand all that, but specifically like for Texas and Washington tonight, DeBoer basically they're up 13 and suddenly they pass 4 straight times. And they get really cute with it. A couple of semi-trick plays, and that almost seemed to wake Texas's defense up. Texas defense was suddenly inspired by that. They get a stop, they roar down the field, and suddenly they're back in the game. It's just kind of funny that it's just the decisions of these. Again, the games are so long. If you just wait for it, you have a chance to take it.
Well, and I think when they did that, the way they've been playing all game, and I'm gonna bail Kalen DeBoer out on that one, because the way they've been playing all game is they had just been slicing and dicing Texas's defense. Michael Penix had thrown for over 400 yards at that point, and it was like, all right, throw the dagger here and just be done with it. And I think that was the point. We'll see. Kalen DeBoer hasn't gone to his press conference yet. I imagine that's what he's going to say when he gets asked about it. And if they'd done that, would have been like, yep, Kalen DeBoer knows the right thing to do every time. But, I understand that the personality of your team is to attack downfield like that. So I'm not going to kill him for that. And again, they did win the game. So it's not like the Ohio State Georgia situation where Ohio State let Georgia back in the game. This was, it was tight. There was a play in the end zone, but Washington won and they are headed to Houston. Michigan, I tell you what, that is just an epic last 3 minutes and overtime. I was down on the field for all of the major action there at the end, and I'm standing right there as they go for 4th and 2 on the 33, and you knew this was it. This had to be it, and they flip it to Blake Corum, and he said after the game, he's like, I saw that cornerback, and I knew I could get the corner, and then he roars past him, and it felt like that woke up Michigan's offense because they. J.J. McCarthy just kind of marches him down the field, a little easy flick to Roman Wilson for that touchdown. And the 2 runs by Blake Corum in overtime were just classic, epic, exactly what you expect from Blake Corum.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it. You wrote kind of an inside, scoop of that everyone should go check out it On3 about those final minutes and kind of what that meant for Michigan. I wrote a piece at On3 kind of looking at the macro perspective. And this has been Michigan versus everybody all season. And I think this was the culmination of that, Andy. That togetherness, that collective effort that no matter the adversity, it's been mostly off the field noise. But tonight it was actually for the first time this season, they faced true adversity on the field. And they answered. They proved their mettle. And it was Blake Corum coming up with his 25th touchdown of the season. It was Stewart blowing up the play. It was a couple receivers who had done nothing all season, catching the first touchdown of their career. Basically Alabama punches first, they go up 7-0, boom, Michigan answers right back.
How about Mason? Yeah, Mason Graham in overtime submarining the entire offensive line and taking down Jace McClellan for a loss. Their stars showed up. For sure. And then, like you said, some guys that we didn't know about showed up too.
Yeah, and this is, it's funny because, again, to speak about Michigan's roster and what you kind of tease about Ari and kind of the blue chips deal that he's kind of dealing with, this is a team that somehow is full of NFL guys, Andy, and yet it's still kind of like a whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
They do have the stars in Corum and McCarthy and some of the other guys, but it still feels like it's just kind of a one team deal. And now they're a win away, and they've somehow survived every distraction, every offseason drama. This has been a team that's constantly been in the headlines, and yet 2023 seems to have been defined, at least in my eyes, this college football season about Michigan versus everybody. So why wouldn't it go all the way up until the national title game?
And I think that's an interesting point you bring up about how many NFL guys Michigan has, because their best guys are old. They are going to lose a bunch of guys to the NFL after this season. That's probably a lot of the reason why there's the Harbaugh to the NFL chatter. But they have we've talked multiple times already about who you bring in. 5 stars. Stars matter. I think what you put out in your program is more important than what you bring in. You do have to bring in good recruits, and Michigan recruits well. Let's not lie. I mean, JJ McCarthy was a 5-star or a high 4-star, depending on what recruiting service.
Mason Graham was a 4-star. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. You're talking about a lot of really highly ranked recruits, but they have developed the really highly ranked recruits and some guys who weren't into NFL draft picks. And like Jim Nagy, when we were at SEC Media Days, we saw him, and he said he thought there might be 17 draft picks in the 2024 draft on this team. Like that's a lot, even against even a team like Alabama, where you have a bunch of guys who will eventually play in the NFL. They're not going to have that many this year.
Well, Harbaugh, yeah, I mean, remember, Andy, everyone laughed and kind of scoffed when Harbaugh said that this Michigan team could, and he said would, break Georgia's record from 2 years ago of, I believe, 17 NFL draft picks, or it was something around that number. And now they're a game away from the national title game, and we're a couple months away from the combine and what have you, and they just might. I mean, this was, it's crazy because Michigan didn't play its best game. They made all sorts of mistakes, the special teams miscues, the drops, the inability to convert on third down. And yet their staff, I think, credit to Jim Harbaugh, credit to Sharon Moore, Jesse Minter, they were able to adjust accordingly and kind of make the necessary changes in the second quarter that allowed them to get out front. And then in the fourth quarter, after Saban and kind of his guys had kind of pushed back, Michigan made the correct adjustments again, and it proved the difference. And that's the mettle of a good team.
Well, they got to get that punt return cleaned up before the national title game. That about killed them. The one in the first quarter and then the one at the very end of the game nearly became a safety, which is just incredible. And yet they still won that game. So, Jesse, if you would like to go to the national title game, there is a way. It will cost you because those Michigan and Washington fans, they're ready to go to Houston. But if you want last minute tickets to the national title game, let's say you're a Michigan fan or a Washington fan who wasn't quite sure until tonight that you were going to get to go to the Game Time app, download it, use the code Staples. You get $20 off your first purchase. Type in CFP National Title Game. It will show you all the tickets that are available for the national title game. You can click on that ticket. It'll show you the vantage point you would have inside the stadium if you choose that particular seat. Couple taps, the ticket is yours. Game Time has the easiest way to get sports tickets, comedy show tickets, theater tickets, concert tickets, you name it. If it's sold out, they've still got it. And you got zone deals and you got section deals. They have a lot of ways to get you these tickets you want. So go to Game Time, download the app, use the code Staples, $20 off your first purchase. They got national title game tickets. So if you want to go to Houston, I'll be there. JD Piquel will be there. You could be there too. Go to Game Time. All right, Jesse, let's talk about this game. Let's talk about Washington, Michigan, because I think if you watch the first 3 quarters of Washington, Texas, you are thinking, oh boy, Michael Penix against this Michigan defense, that Michigan defense that terrorized Jalen Milroe on Monday. Can Michael Penix do this to Michigan's defense?
Well, I wrote before the game, Andy. I thought one of the kind of pressing questions for this particular game, Texas, Washington, was which secondary was going to prove most susceptible. Muhammad got dinged up late for Washington, but the Huskies held up on the back end. And Roma Dunze, Polk, and McMillan are just a load to deal with. Those are not Bond, Burton, and kind of the receivers that Alabama was throwing out there today that Michigan went up to. I love Sanders still. I think Johnson's great. But it would be naive to suggest that Michigan is just going to bottle up these guys because they've been a top 5 defense all season. This will be their toughest test. It's going to be a strength on strength. I think it was notable, Andy, that the Joe Moore Award winning offensive line of the Huskies were at least able to neutralize Sweat and Murphy. They got stoned at times. They got blown up on a 4th and 1.
We didn't see Sweat and Murphy much in the second half. I think that they were – Washington may have been a bad matchup for them because Penix was getting rid of the ball so fast they're getting tired.
Right. And again, Washington really wasn't, Johnson only averaged when he was in the game, I think like 2.9 yards per carry. But it was enough. He just fell forward enough. And that, I would assume that's going to kind of, be the game plan against the Wolverines. I mean, Penix was surgical tonight. I think it would behoove us to at least spend a minute or two on him and just of a masterful performance. He had some throws that were just, you talk about it was like Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games, shooting arrows. Yes. I mean, just darts, just unbelievable darts. He had that throw late to set up Polk down the sidelines. That was a phenomenal throw, and he showed. You know what? It was also interesting for the first time, really, since he was at Indiana. He kind of showcased a little athleticism. They kind of used his legs.
The design runs for him late in the game were their best run game. He has that in him. I mean, who remember the 2020 Penn State Indiana game where he comes around
when he dove in the end zone,
dives for the 2-point conversion? I mean, yeah, he's got that in him, and I think it's one of those things where they're probably not doing that to protect him because he has had 3 season-ending knee injuries. And I think that's the part you worry about with Michael Penix. But he's been healthy for 2 seasons now, and he's held up. So I think, you look at it now, and you probably feel a little more comfortable running him. And in this game where, look, it's all or nothing coming up, you're going to run him. And I think having that option available to you makes that offense open up quite a bit more.
What's not to take us on a little side detour here, Andy, but I think what's going to be a very interesting narrative for you down in Houston with all the continued scuttlebutt with Jim. How you wrote it in your column tonight. He got asked about his future. There's all sorts of the rumors are running rampant about the Chargers, the Raiders, what have you done. I tweeted out tonight. I understand you have Sharon Moore on staff. If Jim Harbaugh leaves for the NFL after the national title game, my first call if I'm Michigan is Kalen DeBoer.
But why are you leaving if you're Kalen DeBoer? You can win the national title at Washington.
You can, but you're in
the same league as Michigan next year.
You might have an even better avenue with Michigan's resources if they're willing to invest. I just think it's an interesting storyline.
Well, let me throw this at you. Regardless of what Jim Harbaugh does, whether he gets an NFL job or not, if you are the Chargers, we don't know if the Bears are going to open up, but it sounds like they might not now. But if you're the Commanders, if you're one of these other teams that we're talking about with Harbaugh, why don't you call Kalen DeBoer?
You could. That would absolutely be a very interesting avenue. Thus far, we haven't heard of his NFL interest, but I don't discount that being a shrewd plan for an organization. The dude wins everywhere. It doesn't matter where
DeBoer is a maximizer of talent, but he's not known as a great accumulator of talent, which in college football still seems to be a major skill. But in the NFL, you don't have to be an accumulator of talent. Being able to maximize talent is the skill.
No, look at that. That's a great. You just gave Michigan their talking point right there. No, not Jim Harbaugh.
It's him, not him.
Yeah.
Listen, I think college football would be much more fun if both of them are back at these schools next year. So hopefully that's what happens. But Kalen DeBoer has just been amazing, his rise. And we had him on the show earlier this year, and he was talking about, how he got to learn as the head coach at Sioux Falls in the NAIA. And it wasn't in front of hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And so he went through a lot of those situations as a young coach. And how I always say, it feels like situationally he's almost always right. He's an old head coach when you think about it that way, even though he's not an old coach.
Right. And again, Sioux Falls, NAIA, and then what he did, with Indiana as their OC to take over Washington. That was a team that, under Jimmy Lake almost seemed like it was having a mutiny.
Oh yeah,
in 1 year,
they were going down fast.
Yeah, in 1 year, he completely turns around the trajectory of that program. Now year 2, you're in the national championship game. What a run! What also, pour one out for the Pac-12 here.
Yeah.
Now,
okay. Well, let me ask you this. While we're on this subject of what happens after, what if Washington wins this thing? Do you celebrate at all if you're the Pac-12, or do you just lament what could have been if you hadn't completely screwed it up? Or do you celebrate if you're the Big Ten? Like, I was talking to a Big Ten executive earlier today, and they said, well, if Michigan and Washington win, we're not going to pound our chest about it like the SEC would if Alabama and Texas win. I'm like, why not? Why not? These are your teams.
No, if Washington wins, Andy, it's the Will Smith Y2K. You're busting it out like the world's about to end, and like because the world has ended for you. It's over. You're going out with a bang. You know, whether it's Will Smith Y2K or REM End of the World. That's how you're celebrating.
So you're saying George Kliavkoff and company should just loot the Pac-12 offices and take back what
exactly.
Like, if Kliavkoff's there, does he like go up on the stage with them? How does that even work?
Yeah, that they should tell him to just go take a seat. The Millennium, yeah.
Oh my God, it is amazing to me. If you think about this, the Pac-12, this is only the third time the Pac-12 has made the college football playoff. This is the second time they've made the title game. They've not won one. What a way to go out if that was it. But like, here's what I do. If I'm Oregon State and Washington State, I send my athletic directors. So I send Scott Barnes and Pat Chun to go up there with Washington and collect the trophy. They're like, no, this is ours too.
We got it. The League of Champions 2023-24.
The 2-pack is taking it back.
What do you think? I mean, just initial thoughts of the opening line there, 4.5 to Michigan.
So yeah, our friends at FanDuel have come out with an opening line. Michigan by 4.5, 55.5 is your total. I think that seems fair. Because I look at that Michigan defense and I think there will be less time for Penix to throw than he had against Texas, and I think it's a better secondary than he was throwing against Texas. And I also think Michigan's offense is going to be a little more diverse. And I think they're not going to, if they're having success running the ball, they're going to keep running the ball.
Yeah. Unlike Texas tonight, which was, again, we teased it, or I touched on it earlier, in the show for the live viewers that may have missed it. I thought it was kind of a strange decision by Sarkisian to not lean on Baxter and those guys. They were averaging right around 7 yards a clip, while Quinn was only completing about 50% of his passes at that point, and yet they were continuing to kind of rely on that passing game. A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy really were kind of absent until late. They weren't even really getting touches, and so I think you're right. I mean, Michigan, Sharon Moore. We saw that against Penn State, Ohio State. Hell, most of the 12 games for Michigan this season, they were going to rely on that run game. No Donovan Edwards really tonight. He was kind of completely a non-factor. But Blake Corum, man, I mean, he's a big game player, and he showed up. He said it afterwards. He was not in this position a year ago because he wasn't healthy. He was here tonight, and he delivered. And that, his vision and his ability to his balance to score that game-winning touchdown that proved the difference, that's going to be, on full display Monday night in Houston.
Yeah, talking to the Michigan offensive lineman about that play, Ladarius Henderson, left tackle, he saw it all. Trevor Keegan said he didn't see it. He was in a pile of bodies, but he heard the roar of the crowd. But Ladarius Henderson saw the whole thing, which is like this incredible jump cut into the hole. And then he spins out of a tackle from Terry and Arnold. And then before he even stops spinning, he starts to spin again to get out of a Kool-Aid McKinstry tackle and then falls into the end zone. It was one of the most incredible runs I've ever seen.
It was, and it was, would we be remiss, Andy, to not circle back and maybe have a couple comments on Alabama here?
Yeah, we definitely need to talk about them.
I wrote before, as part of my preview, one of my pressing questions was which Alabama team would show up, the one that we saw against Georgia, or the one that we've seen kind of for most of the 2023 season, which was, up and down. That they had some highs, they had some lows, but they were extremely inconsistent. And it turns out that is the one that we got. And I also wrote, I thought some folks were kind of running with the narrative that suddenly Alabama had kind of found themselves against Georgia. They gained 300 yards in that game. Jalen Milroe came up with some huge plays. We talked about that. He was a complete X factor. But it was not like the offense had suddenly solved all of its woes. They gained 250 or 260 tonight. He puts the ball on the ground. They could not block Michigan up front consistently. They also, Tommy Rees, went away from the run. Went to the run game too late,
right,
and then went away from it, and I think that proved costly.
Well, and they were getting stuff out of Justice Haynes, where he just is a more explosive back than anybody else they have in that backfield, and it felt like they could have used him a little more. It also, like the center quarterback exchange, Seth McLaughlin was back with the low snaps, which I don't think we saw that much against Georgia, and
we didn't see it at all.
Yeah. And you talk about Milroe, and there was a lot of times he didn't see blitzers coming. Like there was one where they blitzed a linebacker, straight through the B gap. And it was one of those where every lineman was occupied. It was completely on the quarterback to take the sack. Like there's a hot guy out there, and it was CJ Dipre, the tight end. And he didn't even see he didn't see the blitzer. He didn't see the hot. But I think a lot of that was he was bending down to catch the snap almost every play. And like you are putting your head down and then bringing it back up. And that fraction of a second, that especially against a defense like Michigan, they're going to be on you. And that was a huge, huge factor in the game.
Well, and it's just an added issue for a quarterback that already has accuracy concerns, specifically on intermediate throws. And he had a lot of throws that just went into the sidelines.
They hit maybe one. Yeah. There was one throw to Bond late in the game that looked like what they were doing against Georgia. Other than that, it was back to the dink and bomb. And they never hit any of the bombs.
No, they didn't. And Milroe came up with some big time designed runs, but at other times he was just running for his life, you know, and it was just, I think Saban is going to be kicking themselves that even despite all of that, despite all the issues, they're up by a touchdown.
They should have won the game.
He has his defense on the field. Yeah, he has his defense on the field, and they couldn't get a stop.
Yep, they should have won the game, and it was very poorly played. But Michigan will tell you that they had some plays that they want back. I mean, like I said before, the 2 punt return mistakes were crushing for Michigan.
Missed PAT, missed field goal.
Yep. Yeah. So, like, if they clean up the special teams stuff, I think that's going to be very helpful for them in the national title game. Washington is – Washington's not going to make a lot of mistakes. So you can't do that against them. Like this Alabama team, we've seen it make mistakes all year. So what we got was a mistake-filled football game. But I thought Michigan, just the way they came together at the end, and I do think that 4th and 2 conversion on the 33-yard line, I think it was 3:19 to go. It's a little dump off to Corum. He gets the corner. It woke that offense up, and I think because they had to go faster, it allowed them to not have what J.J. McCarthy called that paralysis by analysis, which he was talking about last year against TCU. But I do feel like they had that somewhat offensively on Monday.
Yeah, but it allowed them to play. I mean, because by then you just got to go for it. It's all, whatever. It's all gas, no brakes. To quote Steve Sarkisian, you have no choice. You got to go for it. You know who Michigan's special teams coordinator is, Andy?
It's not Connor Stallions.
No, it is.
It's Jay Harbaugh.
One Jay Harbaugh. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, so while they're celebrating tonight with big old glasses of whole milk, I think he may be getting a stern talking to from
old dad.
From old dad there. That let's clean up that stuff.
Let's throw up something that's very satisfying for a lot of the people who watch. I know it will be very infuriating for some other people who watch, but I think the satisfied crowd is going to outnumber tonight. The SEC has been eliminated from national title contention only the second time since 2005 that the national title game will not feature an SEC team. The other time was, of course, the first college football playoff, that noted Big Ten matchup in the national title game, Ohio State versus Oregon.
Yeah, again, I mean, that circles back to I think the team that's really kicking themselves tonight are the Bulldogs. The fact that they lost in Atlanta, in the first week of December last month, that all of FSU's opt-outs, whatever, notwithstanding, I think Georgia was one of the 4 best teams, and the way the schedule played, the way that the whole deal played out, they were just unlucky this year. And almost every other year in the college football playoff, even if they lose that game, they probably get in. But they didn't this year because we had the undefeated teams, and so that's where we're staying.
JW in the chat says this feels so much like Pistons versus Lakers. It's uncanny to me. Is he talking about 2004, which the Pistons won, by the way, against the Shaq Kobe Lakers, or is he talking about the Bad Boys against the Showtime Lakers? Either way it works. If you're saying you think Michigan's going to win, but it is a clash of styles that I am very excited to see in this Michigan-Washington game.
But wouldn't Michigan be the Lakers in this?
No, Michigan's the Pistons. Michigan's absolutely the Pistons.
They're the Pistons as a physical, tough football team, but they are absolutely the blue blood.
Right, but this is the Lakers are the Showtime, and Washington's the smooth, silky offense that just flies down the field. So I think that's where the analogy. It's a good analogy. Antoine in the chat: if Michigan gets one big time wide receiver, it's over. Y'all better hope and pray Michigan doesn't find anybody in the portal for next year. Antoine, most of these Michigan stars are going to be in the NFL next year. They got to do it now.
Michigan's going to be 9-3 next year.
Yeah, they got to do this now.
This is the title or bust season.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is not to say that Michigan's going to just suddenly be bad. It's that they have an incredibly special group of old players right now.
Yeah, everything's culminated to this. That's the whole point of Michigan versus everybody. That's why, Jim Harbaugh has kind of harped on the whole notion of chasing perfection. The whole season has centered around this special group of guys that has been there since the 2020 turnaround. They've now won 3 straight Big Ten championships. You beat Ohio State 3 times. The mission for Michigan is to now erase kind of some of the questions and issues that they had against Georgia and TCU. They did that tonight against Alabama. Now it's about, cementing this special season with a championship.
Yeah, and it blows my mind. So they're going to play 15 games this year. 6 of them Jim Harbaugh didn't coach. That's still wild to me. Like, I will never forget being there at the State College Airport, waiting for their plane to land as the Big Ten suspension of Jim Harbaugh is coming down for 3 games, which means he's going to miss the Penn State game and the Maryland game and the Ohio State game. That happened 7 weeks ago, Jesse.
Yeah, I wrote it. It's been just kind of a season of distractions and kind of just, drama for this team, and yet it hasn't derailed them yet, and I don't think it will. And no matter, honestly, Andy, no matter what happens against Washington, at this point, none of the Connor Stallion stuff, none of that stuff matters. It's going to be 60 minutes between the white lines, one game, and whatever happens.
You're exactly right. And this is, a season that started with the Pac-12 disintegrating and the Big Ten getting bigger now ends with a Big Ten team against a future Big Ten team. And one of the stories of the college football season, and Washington, I think, is emblematic of this era of college football too, because without the transfer rules, Washington isn't this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you got one of your key receivers is a transfer. Dylan Johnson is a transfer. Obviously, your star player, quarterback Michael Penix, is the ultimate transfer. You've plucked a couple guys defensively, and then you do what Washington's done really for the last 2 decades, which is you have a couple dudes on the defensive line.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
they
they've
got
always,
Trice, and
there's always money in the banana stand. There are always dudes on Washington's defensive line, and especially Braylon Trice, ZTF, like they're fun to watch. Well, Jesse, we got a national title game. We got a matchup. We had 2 classic semis. Now, we've not had a situation yet. We've had classic national title games. Last year, we had 2 good semis that resulted in a terrible national title game. I think we're going to get 2 great semis that lead into a great national title game. I think that's going to happen this time.
It would be a 1-for-1. It's been a 1-of-1 season, so why not close it as such?
That's right. We'll have more about Michigan and Washington. We also got to talk about Nico Mania dawning in Tennessee, the end of the Brian Ferentz era at Iowa. We'll do it all on tomorrow's show. We'll see you at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday night.